Malloy, Slater, and Zhao are here. Commissioner James is not. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Okay. We need to approve the May 2nd workshop minutes.
I move to approve.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, who do I turn this
start.
over to? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Callahan, Community Development Director. Thank you all for being here. This workshop is at the request of the North Idaho Development Professionals who wanted to present their ideas of roads and how they might work differently in the unincorporated counties to the Plan Commission. And I'm all over engagement with engineers and everyone else that wants to make things better in the county. So that's why we're here today. But it's fair to say the county doesn't have any skin in the game yet on this proposal. So at this point, I'll just turn things over to Eric, or whoever Eric wants to lead this, and let you go forward. I've got the entire thing available on the screen if you want to pull through any of it.
Sure. Thank you, David. Well, amongst ourselves here, we nominated Connie to begin our our discussion here.
I actually was not at the meeting where that was decided, so.
That's why.
That's why you're here.
Yeah, you bet. Is that better? Okay, perfect. Yeah, we want to thank everybody for being here today. We do know this is a special workshop and that everyone is making time to be here out of your schedules, so we do appreciate that and the opportunity to talk today. So what I'm going to do today is just give you an introduction to who we are and as a group, and then the individuals that are here today. And then give you just a quick little rundown of what we plan to talk about today. And then each one of us has a different topic that we'll be addressing. So I'll be turning it over to everybody after I do the introduction. So David mentioned that we are the North Idaho Development Professionals. So of course we have an acronym, which is NIDP. We have in our group civil engineers, surveyors, and urban planners. And we work a lot on general development, and we also work on construction engineering, and then a lot of us also work in specialized fields. So we may have people that are wastewater engineers or water engineers or structural engineers or whatever it may be. Specialized planning, you name it. So we actually meet twice a month. And we discuss different items. It's not just, we don't just sit around and talk about the county or the cities or anyone else. We actually meet to share best practices that we have in our industries, to talk about the different regulatory requirements that we experience with the various jurisdictions that we work with. And then also just changes, things that are changing in our fields. There may be information on, like, let's say different housing practices. And so when we're together, we'll talk about, maybe like missing middle housing, just different things and how we're seeing those applied in the field. So today, who we have with us is we have Eric Olson, and we have Stuart Malley, and we have Steve Circle. And these guys are all, Steve Soltis, sorry. Two Steves that are engineers, and I flip them. Sorry about that. So these guys are all civil engineers, and then Rob is a surveyor. He's been in the area for a long, long time. And then Jeremy and myself, we both work in urban planning or we're project managers. So all of us have been doing the work that we do for a long time. It's basically been, our careers. We've spent the majority of our life doing this work. We're licensed both in Idaho, and we're also licensed in other states. And for a lot of us, the majority of our work, though, is here in Kootenai County. And so I bring that up because I want everybody to be aware that when we are here and we're talking with you, we bring with us our backgrounds and our licensing, which is really, there are responsibilities related to that. So we may be talking about one topic, but we also have kind of these obligations within the fields that we work in to further the industry, to further the practice, to do things that are good for the community in general. And so that is a part of the discussion that we have, but it's also part of what we think that we're, bringing to the table in the discussion, is that we do have those professional obligations. And so we're very excited about this, that we are having these opportunities to meet with Planning Commission. We have meetings with the highway districts, meeting with the fire districts, other folks out there that we're also doing on an ongoing basis. So with that, we want to have the discussion today, but we also want you to know that we're here as a resource. If there are things that come up in civil engineering or in planning or in surveying, where there's information that you feel would be helpful in the work that you're doing, that we are there for you outside of today's agenda. So with that, what we're going to talk about today, we have Rob is going to be talking about suburban standards in rural areas. And Stuart is going to be giving an update on private roads and then some of the work that he's been doing with the highway districts and fire districts. He and other people here. Eric will be talking about road cost, taxing examples, and current standards. So he'll have some examples related to some ASHTO definitions and different things. So kind of getting a little bit more down into the engineering component of it. And then I'll just do a quick little recap when we finish. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Rob.
Okay. My name is Rob Stratton. I'm a land surveyor. I own a company in Rathdrum. And primarily I work with landowners, small developers, do a fair amount of minor plats and other types of developments, at least for what I work in. And I'm hoping today kind of just more to set up some more general things that I hope you guys will consider as we work together and as you go on other deliberations, just some things that you might not have thought about that probably starting out with, I think we could all agree that if you talk to the vast majority of people in Kootenai County and you ask them about the development that's going on, the vast majority of people probably say they're not very fond of the development that's going on, and they're frustrated with all the extra traffic and people that don't know how to drive in the snow and people that don't have the North Idaho mentality, at least hopefully maybe they'll get it someday, but haven't adapted to it. And we recognize that, we see those same people, but you could probably say maybe 95% of the people feel that way when you talk to them in general, but something that's equally as universal but maybe not so obvious is when I have a client that comes in and they want to talk to me about something they want to do with their land, and we go over and we talk about what they want to accomplish, and we point out that what the county is going to require, and we go through the process, and by the time we get done, usually the first response I get is something like, well, that's insane. Who brought all these rules on? What happened to my private property rights? And I got to explain to them that, the problem is when we make these rules, the people making the rules hear from that 95% that are anti-development, but they don't hear from the individual landowners and how it affects them personally. And that's what we're hoping to bring, that perspective to things, so we can help put some of that balance in there and you consider the implications as we pass these rules and as new things come on. I think that's equally important. And, in development, we have kind of an old saying that, you generally get a concept from people that let me in and shut the door behind me. Let me do what I want to do, and after that, close everybody else down. And we're hoping to try to come up with a happy medium in there that helps that. I know I was listening to a video of one of the meetings here earlier in the year, and one of you had mentioned the fact that you were anti-development and that you thought that by making things more expensive and harder, that would slow down development. And I would submit that at least what I've seen is that it's probably more the opposite is true. If you get a landowner, they have some acreage and they want to develop their property, and You know, maybe they want to give some land to their kid, or they want to make a little extra money because they're getting close to retirement. They live in the community, they know their neighbors usually, or they're trying to get along with their neighbors. They're usually gonna go in and do the very minimum they can accomplish. They're gonna, okay, I wanna get this, I need to make a little extra money, but they don't wanna do more than they have to. And as we go through the requirements with them, we go through, you know, how much it's gonna cost. Sometimes they've gotta add an extra lot into it to try to help cover the cost or something like that. But as we go through the process and it gets more and more complicated, eventually they throw their hands up, they walk away, they sell the land to a developer. And when the developers come in, you know, from their standpoint, yeah, they're gonna keep costs down where they can, but they're gonna do what the county requires. They're gonna tuck that money into the development. They're gonna maximize their density because that's how they make their profit in the end. And once they're done with it, they move on. Their only concern with the locals is, you know, how do we get through it enough that it doesn't cause too many troubles with the development? And you actually end up with more of the opposite case there because they're just gonna pass the money on to whoever they sell the property to afterwards. And, you know, if it turns out it's somebody from out of the area that can afford the property, that's not as material, it's just, you know, it's more of a business. And a lot of what we look at is it's not always the rule that we make, but it's how the public reacts to that rule that's really important. And I hope we can, you know, that is a consideration as we try to move on through this. I think when we look at what's happened in Kootenai County here, at least from my perspective, one of the worst things that's happened in Kootenai County was about 25 years ago. We came up with the idea that we're gonna take suburban level design and use standards and we're gonna impose them in rural areas. Things like paved roads, garbage service, water requirements, things like that. And they fundamentally don't fit. You start coming in with all that stuff, people in a rural setting, they like take care of their land, they cut their own trees, they maintain their roads. That's part of rural life. And as we start imposing these suburban design standards, now you're bringing in different people that come in. You know, you get people, they're usually more affluent, they expect to hire people to do their logging for them and stuff. They expect to hire people to maintain their roads. And while, you know, that's good, it's bringing in a different type of people into that environment. And I know for the people that live in that rural setting, they start seeing these new people move in and these developments come in next door with these, you know, paved roads that are county roads and big houses in them. And it doesn't fit in the environment that they're in. And that's been a real concern that, you know, look at North Kootenai County, it's fundamentally changing and it's because of the requirements. And that's what we're trying to get to a level that we can get that hopefully backed off some and go back to the idea that, you know, suburban standards are appropriate, you know, like in ACI zones or something like that, or when you start getting close to cities. But when you're in a rural environment, you really got to have more rural design standards. And that's what we're hoping to try to help work back towards. I think one of the other things that's been one of the problems in Kootenai County is that we expanded the ACIs into the prairie and completely swallowed up the prairie. And now what you're gonna get there is you're gonna get high density development. And that's when we see our traffic problems. It's not this low density development we're getting out in the 5-acre parcels, it's this high density stuff that's bringing a lot of people in. And I would submit that probably some of the best things that have happened in Kootenai County, you go back to early 1900s, we had the Post Falls irrigated tracts, we had the Avondale irrigated tracts. If you look at those areas even right now, in north of Post Falls, expansion's going pretty slow because in the early 1900s, those were divided into 10, 20, 40-acre parcels. As development grows, it grows very slowly and very controlled. You look at that compared to the prairie, and we're getting 40-acre, 160-acre developments at a time, and it's just getting consumed up. And that's, unfortunately, I think that's cat's out of the bag right now. I don't think you can put that back in there, but realizing that low density development and smaller standards actually help the growth management more than going the other way and making things more expensive. And I think as we move on, as development professionals and stuff, and people who work with the community, oftentimes we see the rules that come out, and if we haven't had a chance to work with them beforehand, right off the bat we tend to look at them and say, well, you know, this doesn't work for this reason, or it's just, you know, there's fundamental flaws at a technical level that aren't even, was the concept good or not, but they just technically don't work. And we're hoping that as, you know, as our group works with you guys, we can help you to come up with things that work. Hopefully you think about the repercussions more, and we can help you think of how landowners are gonna react to these rules, and we can get more of a cooperative type situation where we can work together to come up with something that's better for the community, rather than, unfortunately, we tend to have too often where there's the government side and the public side, and it gets adversarial, and we're trying to avoid that sort of situation by working in the middle more. And we're hoping as we go on, we can help ease into something like that, or at least offer a different perspective that will helpfully add to the situation. And, hope you guys will listen, and if it helps, great, and if it doesn't, at least we've helped add another perspective in there that can, as we go on. And I think there's some real advantages to it from, trying to help keep housing costs down. That's a big concern right now, that, housing costs are going out of reality, and how can we rein that in? And I think there's some things that we can help in that standpoint. I think there's some other things. Right now, we're trying to bring in some private road standards that we think will help, but there's also other things that we can help on other areas too. We're not just, we kind of landed it early on when we started this, that this private road issue kind of came up. And so that was kind of our first reaction. It's been kind of the meat of this committee so far, this group that we've got so far. But we're hoping to be a long-term group, and we can help in other aspects too. I'd like to see things where we can, helpfully coordinate. I've mentioned it once to the fire departments, but I'd like to see more work towards things like putting on workshops on how to maintain private roads, and thoughts and things that will help people maintain private roads that will, we can get better roads, but we can do it economically, and things that work. I think with HOAs, I think there's some issues with them that I think we can explore more, how we can maybe try to solve some of the issues with HOAs, maybe make them more functional. Or like in my situation, I live on our private road. We tried to get an HOA. We couldn't get one together, but we did basically a volunteer HOA, send out a letter anymore. If you kick in money, we get a third of the people every year kicking money, and we've actually taken 3/4 of a mile of road, and we've graded it from end to end once now. Not the greatest. It's not, not 12 inches of rock like you would like, but it's a whole lot better than it was when I moved out there 20 years ago. And I think there's some improvements we can make that way. And I'm hoping this can be more of a cooperative relationship where we can work that way. And with that, I'd like to pass it on. I believe Eric's going to talk next, and he's going to kind of get some more of our specific ideas we have at the moment.
I'm gonna pass the buck back to, is it Stuart?
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
The next.
Okay.
I'm Stuart Malley. Many of y'all recognize me. I've been sitting in a lot of these workshops here this past year, so especially while we've been talking about there we go. Especially since we've been talking about the minor subdivisions. That was the kind of what brought all this to a head. Staff here was struggling with minor subdivisions. They were getting inundated with them. Then they had started running across these, what they're calling serial minors. People who are developing a major development, but doing it piecemeal at a time. So we kind of looked at the ideas that they had, and that's where we came up with our idea here, and have been working with the staff and presented to you. And I've talked to y'all a little bit about it. We've gone through, fire code standards, what the International Fire Code actually says, and we've established now that that's not really a road design standard. That's more of this is the minimum width we need to get through with the fire truck. So that's kind of what we have with them. So, and the last workshop I was in, I don't know how many back that was, maybe 3 or 4 for y'all. You instructed our group to sit down with county staff and try to work through these design standards and see if we could apply it to minor subdivisions. Well, we all sat down together, and it was about 2 days after all these gentlemen had published their Associated Highway District private road standard now. I don't know if y'all seen that. Has that been conveyed to y'all yet? You've seen it? Okay. Has everybody else on the planning commission seen it?
Which one are you talking about? The amendment?
They put an amendment together for private roads. It's meant to help the county with part of their problem, but it also applies to them where they have private roads in a public right-of-way. I think that was one of their specific first issues they were trying to
I don't know which version. I got a version from the guys, and I did a side-by-side with your proposal because I wanted to see
Right.
the private road standard things you're proposing against you guys' standard road requirements. But I don't know if I saw the one with an amendment in it.
Yeah, and I think it's passing around, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second
You,
page.
y'all will get it in a minute. So we went to that meeting and then we determined, hey, we need, county staff said, hey, we need to get the highway districts involved. So what we did was we went to a meeting with the highway districts, kind of let them know what we're doing, and we actually have a meeting set up with them and two of the fire chiefs from around the community to help. That way we've got all three participants in the room to talk about private road standards and how we get it to fit. So, that was back, early May we did that. And so we've got this follow-up meeting with them and the fire district scheduled for June 6th. So I just kind of wanted to update you on what we've been doing in the meantime since we all talked about this. So y'all got any questions as to what we're doing or where we went, or clear as mud?
Do you mind passing, Stuart, do you mind passing, well, that, and I should have kept one of those for myself. You bet. Hi, everybody. Eric Olson, Olson Engineering. We're a small civil engineering firm in Post Falls. So what you got with you, just wanted to give you a little bit of overview of where the standards are right now and some of the alternatives we've been talking about, including the one that's been added to the highway district standards. It's the second page of your packet there. So the first page here is the Associated Highway District standards for a typical rural road. This has been pretty similar for many years. So this is a prescriptive standard, which means it basically works in just about any situation that we come across when we're building a new road that has to be to highway district standards. Now remember, right now, the way it's written, any major subdivision or any road that accesses more than 4 lots has to be built to this standard. So we're talking about 12 inches of ballast, that's imported crushed aggregate material, 4 inches of base, and 2 inches of pavement, more if it's classified as a collector status roadway or above. So this, as the costs have gone up, the cost to build this section has gotten to be pretty astronomical, and we'll go over that here in a little bit. The second page is what we've been talking about a little bit, the Associated Highway District Standard supplemental to include privately maintained gravel road. So here we've got a little bit, basically a 24-foot finished surface. We're looking at 12 inches of approved Associated Highway District aggregate. So as this is shown right now, I think we're talking about 12 inches of import, but no requirement to pave. So I think in our book, this is a step in the right direction because it gives us another option to do a lower cost road that could, and I think from the highway district's perspective, the way they came up with this is they wanted to create something that could be converted to a public road meeting highway district standards in the future. As I'm sure they can relate to you, they get people coming to them from time to time, maybe more often than that, asking to, hey, will you guys accept our road? So that's that. I think some other aspects from the Associated Highway District standards that are not in your packet that are causing additional expense for roads is with the last issue of the standards, the lowest design speed in the manual is 35 miles an hour. So with that, you've got a larger curve radius. You got larger, well, we call them, you don't necessarily need to know the details here, but larger K values for vertical curves, which in effect, they make that curve longer, and it makes it more difficult to follow the natural terrain. Beyond that, we've also, the maximum road grade has been reduced in the standards from 10% down to 6%, which can result, particularly in hillside areas, in larger cut and fill slopes, more land disturbance, and really the appearance of more of a highway type of road, sometimes in subdivisions with as few as 5 or 7 lots. And so what we're trying to do is come up with something in the middle that's more appropriate, a local road that's just driven by people that are familiar with the road, still safe, still designed to a standard or reviewed by professional engineers, and is less expensive. So the third page you've got here is this is a cost comparison that we put together. Say, how much does it cost to build these different types of roads? The comparison is done based on flat ground on the Rathdrum Prairie. Certainly, if you're in a hillside area, it can get more expensive, but just trying to compare apples to apples here. So the first column that says public road basically is what does it cost to build a road that looks like this on the first page? 28-foot wide paved road with 2-foot shoulders and the imported material, and we came up with $362 per lineal foot. The second column there, which we've titled paved private, I'd say the second and the third columns are, the section was something that we discussed as being appropriate. So paved private, 22-foot wide paved travel width, 2-foot shoulders, and the assumption is that we'd have 2 inches of pavement on 8 inches of imported base rock on a strong native subgrade. And so that, you can see, results in a much lesser cost, $228 per foot. The third column is basically the same thing but unpaved, $162 a foot. And then the last column is, I just basically plugged in the parameters from what's been proposed by the Highway District, which has a little bit more import, 12 inches of import, and that comes up with $185 a lineal foot. So again, I think it's if we had to live with that, I think it'd be a great step in the right direction. Go ahead, Terry.
I guess looking at this thing, of course, I used to build roads for the government, hundreds of miles of roads, and rural roads.
Yeah.
But the question that I have, the question I have is, if you have a major subdivision, you guys pretty well have a say in the kind of roads in a major subdivision. Is that correct? No. That's correct, okay. And of course, then we have these, like you were mentioning, we have these 20 acres where somebody divides them into 4 lots, and then pretty soon you take each 20-acre small subdivision and you combine 100 of those and you got whatever, And then you don't have your standards in the road system then. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with all of this, but we need to do something about this business of the small subdivisions having a road that's only 10 feet wide or something and made out of, minus 200 material or something, and you can't get through there in the wintertime, So, I mean, that's what I'm looking at. And I really don't like the idea of these small subdivisions being multiple hooked together and then we end up with a fiasco, So whatever we need to do in this process, I don't need, personally, I don't need to know the difference between the cost of this type of road and that type of road. I want to know what these folks are willing to have from a minimal standpoint. What are you guys proposing that we need to have on private roads that could eventually become their road? And that's what I'm really looking at. I don't think, the idea, if I had a 10-acre lot, in fact, I'm an HOA, and I'm the president of the HOA, and I'm also managing their public drinking water system. And I've got 10-acre properties in my HOA. that people who are moving in think they're gonna subdivide them into 2 5-acre lots. Well, I won't let them hook up to my water system if they do that, the second lot. I'll put a stop to that, one way or the other. But all they're doing is they got 10 acres, a deep 800 and some foot lot, and they live clear on the back of that. And now they want to subdivide and have another 5-acre lot here, and they want to access it with their current 8-foot wide driveway. See, that's the situation we're finding ourselves in with some of the people doing that, plus your four lots out of 20-acre type of thing. So that's where I think we need to resolve where we're headed with all of this.
Well, I think that kind of, leads into what we're trying to accomplish with all this,
Right.
Terry. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. We've got their standards. We've got what you can do right now in the county, which, is just meet the International Fire Code, which is, as we've determined, nothing. It just gives a basic geometry. So really what we're trying to do, we're trying to find a way, and we feel like if we incentivize people who are putting these smaller, minor subdivisions in, instead of having to go to, it's gonna limit people if they don't wanna build an highway district standard road. They're looking at it, it's too big of a cost. Say a farmer's got 180 acres, he's wanting to develop it, he's gonna do it all himself, but for him to start building this type of road is extremely cost prohibitive. If we approach it from this standpoint to where we now as design professionals are designing the road not to what is the FHWA standards, which is the geometric design standard they use. We could go to a low volume road standard, which the Forest Service, BLM, all have standards that we could use and get these roads to fit the terrain, fit the soil conditions, fit everything in there that we as design professionals have been trained to do. So we're trying to look for more of a, not a prescriptive, but a performance option. Something that we can get in that we know is going to maintain. We're putting our stamp, our license, our reputation behind it. So that's where we're trying to go to get from everybody having to do this, and there has to be some middle ground. We're trying to find a negotiated middle ground compared to what the county has right now. Because technically, a lot of these roads we're talking about, the stuff we've proposed, will be roads that they may get asked to take over in the future, but the reality is they're probably not going to take most of them over unless the developer comes in to them with a package to begin with, says, hey, we're putting this development in. We would like you to take over the roads. Their board has to meet to approve it. They take over the right of way, take over the roads. It's built to their standards, tested per their standards. There's lots of other things that come along that are going to add to that $362 that, that's what we're trying to find a middle ground, to keep the county more rural.
Again, my concern is, say I owned a whole bunch of land. Say I owned a whole bunch of land down Micah Creek or someplace where you got more hills and stuff. And say it's 120 acres and I want to subdivide that into 5-acre lots. What are we gonna, that's a major subdivision. I don't care who does it, whether the farmer does it or whether Joe Blow from San Francisco does it, So I still have a concern that we're gonna end up with some big subdivisions that aren't necessarily gonna have proper, drinking water, wastewater treatment, and road standards, because you've got somebody, and then you don't have any kind of an organization responsible for maintaining the roads in the subdivision, which is a big issue for me. So anyway, I don't want to take any more time, but those are it's okay to say, okay, you got some big development and they're gonna have a 400 acres or 200 acres or 100 acre subdivision. Mine's 120 acres, and we follow these guys' standards because they're maybe eventually gonna end up with some of the roads in there. But to have some educated person, as far as roads are concerned, subdividing 120 acres down in Micah Creek someplace without any road standards or standards for wastewater treatment or drinking water or anything, you're going to end up with a bigger nightmare than we already have. And that's what I'm concerned about.
I know that, it was brought up about the drinking water standards and, asked to, I think it was floated, the idea was floated out there that you're gonna have to go ahead and put a well in and prove that you have water for each subdivision, which we don't support. There are areas in the county that may be applicable, but as a whole, the county's got good drinking water. There's water. There are certain areas in the county that, yeah, you may need to go look first. So that, Terry, I understand you're concerned about that, but I think we can work around that. Now, as far as these road standards, say you had your 120 acres and you want to go develop it, you don't have the capital to put in a road infrastructure like this, but you want to create a subdivision. You want to sell it off, it's part of your retirement plan. A lot of folks that have moved up here, they're coming into this area, they bought in 20, 30 years ago. That's part of their retirement plan. They've been working here. Now they're going to sell off a piece of their land. They're going to get part of it, the kids, and they're lived here, worked here, be part of the community, and that's how they're going to fund their retirement. Pass their wealth on to their kids, however they're going to do it. So what we're trying to do is come up with a standard to where you wouldn't have to build necessarily that, with the understanding that these roads will never be taken over by them. But what we have done in part of our provisions to help account for that is we've addressed minimum easements that are required in these private roads. Right now, there's nothing in the code to state that. Correct, David?
Right.
Yeah, we've put it in here. We say, if it's servicing this many lots, this type of road has this spot of an easement. So these are things that we're trying to address in here, Terry. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I reviewed your draft, and I don't. That first moved end up at Spirit Lake 20 or 30 years ago, and they were having a terrible time getting out of there in the wintertime even, they can't get off of their property out to Highway 54, but, so, I don't have any problems with all of that. I just think that, I don't want to go too far where the guy that just wants to cut his 10-acre property into two lots has to build a 30-foot wide road either, so we've got to somehow balance all this, but we've got to protect not only the community, but we have to protect the environment from doing bad stuff with subdivisions. We really need to do that, guys. We're pushing the envelope around here. Now I'm talking like the environmental engineer that I turned into.
That's where we believe this type of private road standard, now we're following the terrain, smaller cuts, smaller fills. Kind of like the Forest Service, they build their roads and intentionally tell you to follow the terrain.
Yeah,
So
I
if we
have
can
to
do
do
that
the Forest
and
Service
lessen the
road
environmental
standards.
impact,
It-
years ago.
It seems to me that this whole conversation began because of emergency vehicles couldn't get through. And so we had to create a standard that wasn't like crazy and costly, but somewhere where it was an effective compromise. Is that what we're working towards?
Yes, ma'am.
Then,
One of the things,
Part of it.
Okay, sorry about that. You've mentioned the serial miner issue, and you brought it up a little bit. And one of our hopes out of this is that the standard would be something we could use in major divisions, with the idea that if major divisions are economic, trying to develop at a 5-acre parcel level and not putting in the paved roads, people aren't going to try and circumvent them so much by working more with this idea of the serial miners, if they're still coming up with almost the same style road. But yet we have more control over the roads then, where the road better fits the development overall. I know in our talks with Dave, he had brought up the idea of up there, you get around Remington Road, Weir Road, Ramsey, in that area, and they have a development that's, I think it's a full square mile, and they literally went around the square mile first putting in little 4-acre developments all around the outside because they could use common driveways coming out. If they could have come into that same development with a major plat that they could access the whole thing with some level of gravel road, they would have been more likely not to pursue that and come up with something that the overall plan better fits the community, limits accesses to the highway district. Right now, the highway district was concerned in that situation. And it allows them to approach that from a standpoint that they're not getting, oh, well, there's so much cost savings to go this way that we're gonna do everything we can to circumvent the rules. It actually makes sense just to go in with a better development from the start. And that's what we're trying to find, something that you know, like I'd mentioned earlier, is it's not so much the rule, it's how the public reacts to the rule and tries to go around the rule. And that's what we're trying to alleviate that, so.
One other thing that our group has really looked at is we've looked at you look at this from a couple different perspectives. One is a new development, right? Bright, shiny new world. You can come in and you can put in perfect infrastructure. One of the issues the county really has to grapple with is, infill development on existing road systems and, what's the number of lots that are taking access, and there's a fire code provision to it, there are different elements. Well, a lot of that is really something that could probably be dealt with in, the code and in, really being strategic about how we address that. What our group has been more focused on right now is just looking at a reasonable road standard and, implementation of that. But everything here is a little more geared toward new development. So we do understand that as we move along in this discussion and we're looking at infill development or serial miners, because really that is kind of the issue, you're kind of backfilling with other subdivisions, that if we can get the road structure element of this out of the discussion, we can focus in on the implementation and how do we create a safer environment. What's reasonable if you're coming along in your interior to a substandard road system? What would be reasonable in terms of trying to get to some degree of upgrade in that area? So we're thinking about that. We have tossed around different ideas related to code amendments. So for example, we've looked at things like the exempt segregation, which, for the county, and I guess for all of us, because we live in this area, when there are exempt segregations, you're going out, you're creating 20-acre lots, but where are the future roads going to be? Where are the approaches? What are the assumptions of these folks that are buying these 20-acre exempt segs that then later become these minor subdivisions? And so we've tossed around ideas like having the highway district, before you go in and create an exempt seg, being able to approve approach locations. Or maybe as part of that process, you would have to provide the right-of-way in easement for whatever future type of road system would be in that area. So we are really thinking about that, and we're not saying that with what we have here, we have all of those implementation elements in place. We're really just focused on how do we get to an acceptable road standard that everybody can agree to, so we're not building these, kind of super roads out into the rural areas. And again, there's a variety of different things that people have brought up here related to, do they fit the environment? Who do they attract? Different things like that too. So believe me, we're thinking about that. We're thinking about serial miners. We're thinking even back to, the origin of those with these exempt segs. And we want to continue to work on that and have further dialogue on that.
Kevin, you want to speak?
If I could, Kevin Howard, Worley Highway District Director. With the addition of the privately maintained gravelled standards, there's no reason that can't be used in your major subdivision, say Black Rock North or Black Rock. It's private as long as that gate's there. My comment, and through my years, I've been at the Highway District over 35 years, so what I've seen is that the biggest issue is lack of right-of-way, and I see that you've addressed that with the caveat, however, in there you do say that you can have variances at the county's, a decision made by the county to give a variance to that. I don't think that that would be appropriate. I think the Highway District would at least look at that. If you go back 25 years ago, subdivision ordinance 394 was being drafted, that was brought in, and Kootenai County came to the highway districts and asked us, they said, we don't have road people because we don't have roads. Would you please? And we signed an MOU, and we've been looking after that ever since. The new ordinance is lesser than 394. 394 was more stringent, where we had to look at connectivity, continuity. We were asking for rights of way where we could see a road on the other side that eventually we want to get to. So we're asking for those things. That's not in there now, connectivity and continuity. But it is for fire emergency services. That was the intent, because you don't want to get to a dead end road and you have to go 10 miles around to get to the other side of that. So all that said, things are lesser now. In my view, I've always said that if we had the right of way, I don't care if you build a bicycle path, because it has to meet our standards before we take it over. So if you have a horse trail or a bicycle path, that's fine. But what I will say is there's been a concern about the grade of rock used in the foundation of that. And I would say that if a grade of rock or that road was built in essence, not to our standards to start with, not using our privately maintained gravel road standards, then to eventually bring that up to standards for us to take over, all of that material would have to be removed. So now you're looking at $20 a foot cost difference, but it's gonna cost you as much money to remove that road as it did to build it in the first place if it's not built with the right material. So eventually, and they all do, they come back and they ask the public to maintain that. So I would venture to say that the 362 is off the table as long as it's privately maintained, 362 a foot. And I can't speak for the other highway districts. I just know down at Worley, we're a little quieter down there, you know, and your water concern is huge down there because the lake is there because it doesn't leak, you know. You gotta find an underground creek. So, anyway, that's my view on that. I would just like to say that going back to 394, the county found a need, come to the highway districts to fulfill that need. It wasn't that we were interjecting and saying that we must, but now that we see the benefit for proper growth in the area, there is a benefit for us to look at that. And I'm glad to see that you're looking at approaches, because Idaho state law says that if there's a piece of property that fronts public right of way, we have to grant them access. And if somebody comes in and arbitrarily builds something, and you have a 35, 45 mile an hour road, but you have to slow all the traffic down to 15 miles an hour around a corner to allow somebody to have a driveway, then that's poor planning. So that's my piece.
I'll grab the mic. Yeah, appreciate that, Kevin. I think the purpose of our next meeting here, or with the highway districts on the 6th, is maybe to get into some detail on some of the things you may not like, some of the things that we don't like with, and you know, see if we can find some common ground and before we come back here. Just wanted to add that.
I'll add my thoughts to it as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ben Weymouth. I'm the director of East Side Highway District. I'm also a licensed engineer, and 5 years ago I would have been sitting right there with them. I've worked with them. They've worked for me. We did it all back in the day, more or less. And they're definitely competent engineers, so it's good to see that kind of level coming, this kind of level of input coming from the private professional community back to the county community. The other thing that's going to need to be talked about and considered moving forward, and it has to some extent, is the long-term operation and maintenance. Because I can tell you, when you're designing the road, you've got some standards that consider that. It took me 2 years in this job to think that way first. And no offense, but you guys can't do it. You do look at it differently, you do think of it differently, because you go plow the private road when the sheriff's department or the fire department calls up and says, we need assistance, we can't get in there. And the other thought that I was thinking about while everybody was talking is the people who just want to be left alone are dwindling. East Side Highway District's lucky, we still have a lot of them who are self-sufficient. They don't call us when there's a tree in the road, they pull the chainsaw out of their back of the car and take care of it. Those are dwindling. The people who are coming here now are expecting roads that are plowed and maintained. I can guarantee you the first time it snows, our phones will ring all day long with people asking when the road will be plowed, and we will say, you got to call somebody other than us, we're not doing it, it's a private road. They don't even know that. I mean, buyer beware applies, you know, to the development community as well. Most of these parcels that exist today were created after the current land use rules were there. This isn't a surprise. What is different is 5 years ago you could look at cost of materials and you could multiply it by 2 and you were really close to what your construction cost was going to be. The numbers that are on this spreadsheet now are somewhere between 3 and 4 times the cost of materials. That is not a reason to change the development rules. And it is a crazy world. And I have serious budget fatigue over what everything costs right now. And it is absolutely maddening. We can barely keep up with our roads. Maybe 20% of our roads even meet our current standards because they're legacy roads from before the highway district existed. They are a pain in the butt to maintain, and they are expensive. But since the cost wasn't borne by the development community at the time that it happened, it now amounts to a government subsidy for the maintenance and the rebuilding that's happening on them now. And that's something you need to think about. Because if development doesn't pay its way, and I'm not saying this proposal does or doesn't pay its way, but if development doesn't pay its way, that's the same as telling them the government's going to subsidize the development. And that's kind of a backwards way of thinking about it, and I never thought about it till somebody else told me that. But those are issues that are important to think about as this continues. And there was a day when the county was in the road business, and you're not anymore. I would suggest there was a reason for that, although I have no idea what it was.
Before your
guess.
time.
Yeah.
I think, you know, guys, it's just paramount that no matter what size of a subdivision you're coming up with, that we require the person that's subdividing the land to have some type of a road maintenance organization for the roads in those subdivisions. I don't care whether it's 100 acres or 500 acres or 20 acres. If you don't make those people maintain the roads at their expense, if they're a private road, you guys shouldn't have to be doing. I don't want to pay for that either. But the idea of allowing roads to be built all over the county with no provision to maintain them is just ridiculous. And so we've got to have that as a minimum, I think, in anything we come up with as a group here, because it's just nuts to not have any kind of a road. And then, you know, when they come to somebody and say, hey, I want my road graded, or I want something done with it, say, well, hire your contractor to come out and blade it for you. It's your road. It's your responsibility. See, that's the reason this is so much it comes home to me is that by managing a public drinking water system owned by every property owner in my subdivision, they move in here from California or someplace, say, oh, well, you're the water company. You do this, you do that. And I said, oh, by the way, I'm going to tap you all for an extra $2,000 or $3,000 because I got to buy a new backup generator that costs $100,000 from CAP. And oh my God, you have to keep telling them that their responsibility includes the maintenance of their water system and the maintenance of their roads. But you got to have those agreements in place so that you can make them do it. Guys, what I do is I file liens against their property if they don't help me pay for the maintenance on their owned infrastructure, okay?
Couple of thoughts. One thing I do really appreciate is the interest in the stated desire in this, that it needs to fit long-term transportation planning needs. Everybody needs to be aware of that. The real problem this county has coming is that with what's generally called the free 20-acre lot splits that have happened, there are tens of thousands of new lots with zero thought into planning today. The minor subdivisions on those are coming. They're not owned by Grandpa Jones anymore. They're owned by the investors. You can sit there. I've watched it. I've watched the big parcels, the names on them start changing. They're all LLCs now. They're all 20-acre parcels now. They're all going to be minor subdivisions now because that's the most cost-effective way to develop it. That's perfectly legal and that's perfectly fine. But are we all going to want to live here in another 50 years when that all exists? I don't know. I mean, if you want to see a subdivision that was built before the Land Use Planning Act and is still a county subdivision, I'll take you and show one, and I have you no doubt that you're going to say this is a bad idea. And it's horrible. The water district up there is putting $8 million into rebuilding the water system right now. I'm going to put $500,000 into rebuilding 3,000 feet of road, because it's dang near impassable. So that's an extreme example, right? Building paved roads everywhere is probably an extreme example as well. Where we land in the middle is one heck of a challenge. The county has to decide if you want to be in the road business or not, I guess. Private roads means not us. Let's back up on one thing there for sure. For a road to be a public road maintained by the highway district road, it has to be accepted by the highway jurisdiction. That's state code deal, as it should be. So to be perfectly clear, our jurisdiction on private roads is whatever Kootenai County asks us to help them with. That's it. We have the MOU, they ask us to review and improve them as they go through the process. But to be blunt, we have no jurisdiction on private roads. That's why when somebody calls up and says this, we say, nope, we can't spend public money on a private road that hasn't been accepted by the agency. The developer in the development community is gone within a year of the private road being built as well. So when those people have an issue, they come back to either Kootenai County or the highway district and say, help me with my road. That is a weekly occurrence for every one of us sitting here.
And I understand, it's not your responsibility, it's not the county's responsibility, it's not a public road, it's private. That's why we gotta force these individuals subdividing these properties into having a signed agreement of some kind for everybody that buys a piece of property in that subdivision, that they are mutually responsible for maintaining the roads in that subdivision. And the only way you can do that is to have bylaws and covenants when you develop the subdivision. I lived in an HOA in Virginia where it cost me $700 a month outside of Washington, D.C. Well, we're not talking about that, but without some kind of an organization managing your subdivision, you got chaos because you have nobody to maintain any of the infrastructure within the subdivision. All you do is you're dumping all of that misery on the individual property owner when they move into our community and buy a property in that subdivision.
One thing that I have brought up a few times, we haven't had much chance to discuss it, and I mentioned it, I know we had a meeting with Dave one time that I'd mentioned that one of the things that I think we could try to work towards with a road design standard like what we're looking at here, and it would work like an infill or in areas that, say somebody goes out and splits a bunch of 20-acre parcels they want to develop, is do some sort of a performance-based standard where you have the same road standard you're working towards, but as each parcel comes in, they do some percentage of the improvements working towards this final road that would get us getting further along. And right now, we're kind of in a situation where most discussions either you have to do it all or you do nothing. And this is something where we could bring the road along and get better roads over time as we do this and move that along. And I think it's going to take some figuring out how that could work, but I think there's some merits there as to separating the idea away from, okay, you can circumvent the rules because you're still going to end up there, but still not dumping all of the development in one certain situation. I think there's ways we can work that direction to try to get something where we get better improvements. Even if it's a matter of just going out, clearing the trees back more, shaping the road better, putting better drainage in, everything improves the road and gets it further along to that matter and makes it so it's more accessible in the end. And I think there's some things we can go that way that
You're gonna have to hire somebody to enforce that.
I'd like to add that it comes back to the right-of-way width. And it always comes back to that. There's infill that went through, you're talking about a subject we discussed 20 years ago. So you're talking about the infill and then somebody at the end of a 3/4 of a mile long private road that has 15 homes already on it that was allowed back in the 70s. And somebody wants to split at the end to do exactly what you're talking about, cover some financial expenses or whatever the case may be. And we had to turn it down and we say, at the time, subdivision ordinance 394, you have to bring that road up to Worley Highway District standards. Well, this gravel standard would work that we're talking about, but they might have to come back and get some easements, but they would have something that the fire department would be happy with, the highway district would be happy with, although we wouldn't take it unless it had the right of way or easement to get the width. But if you can figure that out, you're doing better than we did 20 years ago, because we had a hard time trying to accommodate people on a dead-end road that pre-exists. That's my thing I keep pounding, is right-of-way width and prepare for the future, because it'll come back to the highway districts. If it doesn't meet the right-of-way width, and then the public has to maintain it because they're, for whatever reason, forces them to, then that puts the county in the road department, in the road business. And then our jurisdictions won't be jurisdictional boundaries, but jurisdictional by acceptance. So the county might have to run down, and I'll tell you, back in 1970, before the highway districts, I lived on Conklin Road. We moved out of Coeur d'Alene in 1970 because it got too busy for my dad. So anyway, on Conklin Road, that was a county road. So somebody had to grab a plow truck, go down the old goat trail that was US 95, go to the end, and we got plowed out once a week whether we needed it or not, you know. And then eventually the highway districts in 71, that happened. So you're gonna see something like that possibly, if you don't have the right-of-way where we can work in the future to allow those to be entered into the highway districts if accepted. But the county, I don't think, wants to be in the road business. So again, right-of-way width.
And I just wanted to speak to that. We've had discussion about that here in our group, and I know I've had clients who've gone into areas with large acreages, and we advise them right from the get-go, plan on 80 feet of easement, so that we have 60 feet, and then the two 10-foot utility easements, and then we can accommodate what's needed now for road structure. And if it ever becomes public, you know, we have the right-of-way, or we have the easement there to eventually become right-of-way. And that's something that I don't know if it made it into the draft that we have or not.
It
but
is, yeah.
Essentially, yeah, that I don't have it in front of me right now, latest and greatest. But yeah, that is something that we really recognize the need for. Now, again, where it gets a little more intricate is infill development. So if you're, you know, 5 lots up an existing private road and you're doing a 2-lot minor subdivision, do we provide that right-of-way where we have that portion of road within our property? Does it make sense to do that, or does it not? And I think a lot of that kind of is based on terrain, really the future development potential of that area. How likely are you to gain that additional right-of-way as you go along if it's already developed? But I think that would be a really good tool, and a part of the solution would to be able to do a consultation with the highway districts as we go along and say, hey, do you see value when we do this minor subdivision? And us providing that 60, 80 feet, whatever it may be. And I think it really just depends on what that environment is like. But I think it'd be a good discussion to happen between the development community and the highway districts. And I see that as one of those kind of infill development tools that I think that we hope to bring to the table. Because to me, new development is so much simpler. It's really how do you work with these existing road systems and try to, you know, again, people want to develop, they want to have their, you know, exercise their property rights. But, you know, we have to look at the infrastructure and we have to look at the demand on that. So how do we do that? And again, I don't think we have all the solutions on that, but I think that we can, you know, craft it. So that's just an example of maybe having a consultation with the highway district as part of that.
Well, I propose that we don't allow any development of any property that doesn't have an easement on it for a road, period. I don't care if it's an infill or a brand-new subdivision, because here's the key. You ever have to buy right of way to build a public road? I have, and those guys there have too. The fact of the matter is, if you got 30 lots, potential lots, 10 of them are developed without the proper easement, but the last 20 will be developed with the proper easement. They only have to buy easement on 10 properties instead of 30 then in the future. So I think we can handle easement in our paperwork here. My concern is the business of the, you know, maintenance and some of the other issues that we've already talked about, because I don't know, you know, these 20-acre things made into a great big thing, you know, It really, really, really bothers me, I can tell you. I don't care who's developing, if it's, Paul Bunyan that's gonna build a subdivision, I don't care. He better, by God, hire an engineer to engineer his roads for him. So that's just the bottom line, because we can't continue to operate the way we are in the county.
Yeah, part of how y'all are handling the infill right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is the impact fees, right? When we develop is it a minor and a major, or just the majors?
You're talking about in lieu of fees?
Yeah, in lieu of, or impact, yeah.
So we don't have formal transportation impact fees as they're defined by state code. We do allow people, and this causes some confusion on the minor subdivisions, where building the frontage adjacent doesn't make sense from either a practical standpoint or a cost standpoint, because we don't want half a road hanging off the side of a 2-track on a new minor subdivision that's adjacent to it. That's just a maintenance nightmare, and frankly, we'd all look stupid as well, because it would be stupid. So in lieu of building those improvements, the Highway District Association said, okay, you can pay a fee per lot. We'll hold it until such time that a road project comes through, and then we'll use it for that road project, which that's made it through the Supreme Court, it works. That gets confused with impact fees, but all these 20 acres, if everybody out there walks in and files a building permit on them, we have zero change in our revenue either at that point in time or long-term. But our maintenance requirement goes up. The roads really don't care what kind of subdivision it is. They just care about how many more cars are on them. That's all it comes down to at the end of the day for us on our public road system. The other thought that was occurring to me on the private roads, I think we see them in Kootenai County in 3 instances. You've got the high-end gated subdivisions who want their privacy. You got the people who just want to be left alone, which is fine. And you got the developers who want to save money, which is fine too. I've designed a lot of those roads for people like that, and that's their right. I have no problem with it. The problem with every single one of those, nobody there knows how to maintain them. Nobody there does maintain them. For every single one of those examples, and mind you, I've only been at the Highway District for 4.5 years, I have had people come and ask us for help maintaining the roads. They don't do it. They don't know they need to do it until it fails. So you don't see it. And then when it fails, it costs you twice as much to rebuild it as it would have been to rebuild it right the first time. Is the county going to get into the business of saying what needs to be included in an HOA for long-term maintenance? I think you're going to run into some private property concerns way quick. That's an odd place to be. But I would certainly say it's a good idea. But it's weird. Public agents exist for that purpose. The other thing, I couldn't help myself, I had to put a pencil to it. Just look at a 20-acre parcel with a 500-foot road stuck into the middle of it, getting split into 4 lots. The cost between a full public road to highway district standards and the privately maintained gravel road standards the highway districts have developed works out to $4,400 an acre. I'd offer that with an acre being in the $75,000, $80,000 range these days, that ain't a heck of a lot.
One of the things I'd like all of us to keep in mind is that if we were to implement something like what's on the screen, and we had the kinds of cost savings in roads that it seems the math bears out, which looks like it's somewhere between 50 and 30% less. Is that right? It strikes me we will have a boom of subdivisions, just like we had with minor subdivisions in 2019, 20, and 21, because of the change in regulations. Because it's hard to imagine that there won't be people wanting to take advantage of a 30 to 50% less cost in infrastructure. Just an opinion, but one that I'd like you to consider.
Ben, what'd you say? It was a multiplier of 5 from 5 years ago? 4.5 to 5, what they're already paying? I mean, the price has already escalated so much right now.
In
I mean,
land values.
everybody's in sticker shock. So what?
Land values.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, no, we're talking road cost.
Oh, construction costs.
Construction costs, a
Okay.
factor of 4.5 in the last 5 years.
Right.
That's what they're averaging. So, every little bit helps, David. We're about affordability, keeping people in the county. People who grow up here aren't going to be able to
Get
afford
that,
to live
and
here.
I'm with you, and I want us to get there.
Right.
But I also have been doing this long enough to know that it's naive to think that just reducing costs would pass it on and make it more affordable. Almost every developer I've seen in the last 43 years does things based on the market, not on what their costs are in the development process. Because if the market will bear it, they will charge it.
I think, just looking again, the example that we have too is prairie flatland. So one of the things that was brought up earlier is the cuts that we need to make the grade standards and things like that. Those aren't accounted for in what you're seeing there. And I think someone here made the point earlier that the only people that can really afford that are people from out of the area, that is the corporations. And so, again, part of the thinking is a lot of our clients are people who are local. They live here. They want to be able to do development. They're not coming to us because there's a discount on roads. They're coming to us because they want to live in the area. And so what we're trying to do is, as they go through this process, we want, them to be able to actually see it through to the end.
I'm not
And not
arguing
have those
that, I'm
costs
just
drive
hoping
them
we
away.
look for unforeseen consequences.
Well, and I get that, but I just don't think there's going to be a big boom of minor subdivisions because we
I'll
have a
buy
more
you
reasonable.
dinner at the Davenport if that's not the case.
Well, I don't know if I'll look forward to that or not, but we'll.
It may not be necessarily a boom in minor subdivisions, but you would certainly think that it's gonna be a boom in major subdivisions. Because if major subdivisions currently require associated highway district standard roads, and we go to a different standard, it's gonna be easier for that development to pencil out if it's a lower standard of cost for the road.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about context-sensitive development, we're talking about something that fits in a rural area, I mean, it's about much more than that. And the county, I thought, did like major subdivisions, so, so I mean, if that is attractive and an incentive, maybe it would drive more of that type of activity too, which, again, is better for you than the serial miner. And, so again, we're not trying to drive any type of activity. We're just trying to solve or provide solutions to issues that we're currently experiencing.
A gravel road in a major subdivision might be an adequate road. I mean, if it's got the right template and got the proper right-of-way and all that kind of stuff. And I think we're kind of mixing. Our real big problem, I think, is maybe with these small subdivisions being glommed together to make a big subdivision and having no standards of really any other than the fire standards for the private roads. And so I don't want us to get mixed up in the process of worrying about major subdivision necessarily having a 28-foot wide gravel road with 8 inches of 3/4 minus rock on it. I mean, I'm looking at trying to get control of these minor subdivisions being made into major subdivisions with very inadequate infrastructure. So if you guys are willing, I guess with your amendment here, you're talking about a gravel road that would be appropriate, I guess, in a major subdivision. Is that correct?
You're on the right track. I'd say there's a
Yeah.
limit to how many, I don't remember the rules of thumb right now, but there are some, daily traffic volumes. Once you reach a certain threshold, it shouldn't be gravel anymore, just because you can no longer hold the gravel together with that much traffic. These proposed standards, I like seeing that there was 300 trips.
Yes.
was the maximum for a gravel road, basically 30 lots. Do you guys remember? I want to say it was 200 trips is what the general guidance is before you go to a paved road.
Well, you guys you can do your engineering on it. I mean, I used to build gravel roads for the Forest Service, that I hauled 50 million board feet of logs over with log trucks with 10-foot bunks on them. I mean, and they held up because I maintained them, maintained the drainage and the surface by blading it every so often. But that's another story. So I don't, and you can calculate the number of iterations of traffic based on, occupancy in the subdivision and all that. I don't have any problems with that. But I just don't want us to get mixed up saying, well, what we're gonna do is gonna cause a whole bunch of more new big subdivisions. I wanna get control of these minor subdivisions being made into big ones. That's the one I think where our real issue is.
Well, I mean, that was our intent to come in here with these standards, was to try to help that, to use these standards that would get people to not try to do serial minors to avoid having to go to highway district standards. That was the intent. We all got together and started this. Now, to answer your question, where's the number come from, the 300? Mm-hmm. That was us kind of taking a wag about what people would accept, because the generally accepted engineering practice is you take 10 trips per day per lot. It's kind of a standard rule of thumb that we do when we look at the traffic count, and we use that traffic count to put into mathematical models to tell us what kind of structure we need to hold that kind of traffic load up. So that's kind of where that all comes from. So it's all based off FHWA's. They have their design standards for low volume roads and normal, what they call normal volume roads, I guess. Go ahead, Kevin.
I think too, you're gonna find that the target clientele is gonna determine whether or not that's paved.
Correct.
CDA National was gonna hold off a year. They had an agreement with Worley Highway District to build 2 miles of our road up to Worley Highway District standards. Did a wonderful job. They wanted to kick it out a year, and I reminded them, I said, you're already selling lots. Do you want your clientele to come over a road that you're in the midst of constructing to try and sell a lot, or do you want them to come out on a nice new paved road with wonderful shoulders? And they built a year early because of their clientele, so that's gonna dictate a lot of it.
Were there any other parameters that you took into consideration beyond the 300?
David, can you scroll down to our table? We didn't have it. We had in that table, I guess, it's in the packet. What page would it be on? I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the one we need. We took several things into account. If you look at that and go down through that. Turn the mic on. We looked at surface standard, minimum grades. We talked about easement widths, easement for public and private, how the easement language, try to put some kind of cursor in there to talk about that kind of stuff. Maintenance agreements, how are we gonna handle those? How do they fit in or weave into this? Are they part of this? I don't know if they're part of this or part of the subdivision code to say that you have to have easement or maintenance agreements. So, how do we weave that in there? So we've been thinking about all this stuff and talking about it. What this little solution right here was to just handle private roads that we were trying to help steer serial miners to be able to put them more toward this to where we can have a planned infrastructure going into it. Not just keep piggybacking, and you've got a goat trail leading up to 500 homes. I mean, that's what we're trying to avoid.
I know that, Connie, you mentioned earlier that the implementation strategy isn't yet established. It's still kind of a 30,000-foot picture here. I guess to me, it makes more sense in looking at this from like a public road frontage. Like if you have a parcel of 200 acres or whatever, and they want to do a major subdivision and it has existing public road frontage and they want to put in a private road, I can get that. It makes more sense to me. The problems that I see though is if we're having this same development being served on an existing private road, how you are to implement something like this, it doesn't make sense to me how that's going to happen. Because, if we're talking about, as Kevin mentioned earlier, easement width, right-of-way width is important to us, it's gonna be very unlikely that the properties between that development and the public road are going to grant that easement or that right-of-way width to allow for that subdivision to go through. And in addition, as Terry has been kind of beating the drum for, is, maintenance. How is the maintenance gonna happen to get those in? And like, Rob was saying, it's really hard to get people together on an existing private road to put in the cost and share the cost in maintaining this, because people just aren't gonna do it. Some people are just like, you know what? No, I'm not gonna participate. And so I see benefit in looking at it from a strategy of like adjacent public road frontage. But how that all works out, I'm not quite sure. So I don't know, for what it's worth.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you expressed that, because, I work with the county a lot, and I sit in a lot of pre-application meetings, and I see the struggle that the staff has with these judgment calls and guidance that they're trying to give people who are doing infill development on existing systems. And the county wants to give them good advice, but it's a difficult situation. Are the easements appropriate? Were they written appropriately to begin with? Do they have legal access? What's the road structure in the area? What's, their proximity to, either a highway or a highway district road system? I mean, all of those are the things that are being filtered as, we're going through this discussion. And, of course, a property owner just wants A, B, C, D. They want a checklist and they want it to be predictable. And it's not in that environment. So I think, again, and I've kind of peppered the discussion with this a little bit. What we've developed works really great for new development and where you're coming off, maybe an existing public road system. We 100% fully recognize that the more difficult part of the discussion is how will this apply to infill development? And we want to work through this before trying to get into that part of it. But I think, we need to have a solution for both. Grandfathered rights, different things that people have. We all know that we come from a before world. The existing environment is already built. There's not a lot that we can always do about it. So what we're doing is we're trying to improve a standard going forward that everybody can mutually agree to, that they think is a good path forward with new development. But we understand that the effort that we're going to have to put into those infill development standards is going to be significant. But we want there to be a solution for the county. I mean, a lot of these examples of the serial miners where, you're out on Ramsey Road and you have every approaches every, so often, and, things like that, or a very substandard road system put into an area that went through exempt segs and then subsequent minor segs. None of us in our group are, we don't support that concept. We think it is time to start addressing those problems that are there for the county. And it serves us and it serves us our clients because there's predictability. We get closer and closer to being able to give them the ABCD checklist instead of well, gosh, we don't know, but maybe you'll get through this and maybe you won't. But you'll have expended $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 trying to figure out if you're going to get approved. So I think, and I'm probably restating it again, but that's very important to us. And we see that being a big part of the discussion. But if we can get to that mutually accepted standard moving forward, it gets us further along in that discussion. The other thing too is that code amendments, a code amendment package doesn't have to address absolutely everything. You can do that progressively. You can come in and you can adopt code amendments that address something like this for new development, and we can still say, hey, we're working on infill development. And it's an existing environment, it's already imperfect. Every meeting that the planners had this week with somebody who's trying to develop, they were having that discussion about that imperfect world. So that can continue along as we bring forward solutions for new development. But we want to be a part of it. And, again, we all have ethics and standards and licensing and things that guide how we want to be a part of that discussion, where we're thinking of the public good, which is part of why we meet with the fire department. You know, public safety is a huge thing. We want to be, you know, aware that whatever we're proposing is something that is a solution for them as well. So I 100% agree with you. I'm glad that you brought it up, and you know, hopefully you understand that we are trying to work through that.
I think, you know, there's a lot of concern about private property rights and all that kind of stuff. And don't misunderstand me, you know, I keep a pistol on my hip so my neighbors don't bother me sometimes too. So, but anyway, the point is that I don't want us to compound. Say you got 100 acres here that's going to be subdivided, and you got an old half whatever road that goes through another old subdivision. I don't want us to say, well, let's just let these guys get away with the same thing these guys got away with because we don't have proper access to the. I lived in Virginia, and the roads that George Washington rode his horse on, like this all around, you hit a new subdivision back there in Fairfax County, and it's a 4-lane paved road past the subdivision with turn lanes. And then as soon as you get past the new subdivision, it's back to George's road again. And they nailed the developers for the 4 lanes with turn lanes. Every single subdivision back there's done that. Pretty soon, the whole county has got 4-lane roads with turn lanes in it, see? But that's, we don't want to, this business of grandfathering, you know, like I jokingly say, sometimes grandfather needs to die. But anyway, you know what I really, you know, we're getting to the point where we give everybody an excuse not to follow standards because we can grandfather them, you know. But I think that sitting in those guys' shoes, if they do have to get a road, make it a public road, and have to go out and buy right away, where are you going to get the money, guys? You don't have a source, I don't even think, do you, to buy that right away? So we need to make sure that all the subdivisions that we have proper easements and stuff like that in them. I don't care whether it's clear at the far end of an old goat trail or something. They ought to be required to have easements on their property for a road.
Can I weigh in? My name is Jeff Tyler. I'm the chairman of the Post Falls Highway District. So I'm an elected official, so I look out for the people. I really like this meeting that we're having today, talking about all the pros and cons. And I think what we really need to do is come up with some kind of compromise that does address some of the different issues. I was really excited when I heard that our directors had come up with this along with our attorney. One of the things that really frustrates me when it comes to budgeting and being the chairman is whenever these minor subdivisions go in, everybody pays in lieu of because we don't want to do half a road. Well, that in lieu of fee is about $7,500. So you've got this big long road, and you add all those in lieu of fees that are going down in value every day with inflation. What are these people getting for their money? The road standards on page 1 are so expensive that we will never be able to use that money to build this page 1 road. We might as well just throw it away. So by reducing the standards, there's a chance that we can get more roads in at the reduced standards, which would be a better road that seems like everybody in here would like to see. And then also with those reduced standards, we could possibly upgrade them with some of that funding that's for that road. See, that in lieu of fee can only be used on that road and not any other road. And it can only be used for building a new road. We can't even use it to maintain or improve the road. So by reducing standards, there may be a chance that we could, a better chance that we can improve roads for people. And that's what I want to do for my constituents in my highway district, because in Post Falls, of course, you guys all know south of the river, there's a lot of terrible roads back in there. And if we can improve some of the roads and even bring them up to our standards, if they come up to our standards, then we can actually get some state funding to help pay for the maintenance of those roads. So to me, as the elected official, that's would be my goal. You know, let's work towards getting something accomplished like that, all working together. Thank you.
I'd just like to say the in lieu of construction fee, I've affectionately called that the mom and pop special to begin with anyway. You have 7,500 per lot created, you do a minor, so there's 3 additional lots. And, I forget the math now, I've always been 3,500 for years, that was 10 grand. So back in the day when it was 10.5 for somebody, they would balk on that, and I said, well, that's by the graces of the Board of Commissioners. If you don't like that, we can back up and then require you to build the frontage. And I said, that'll be roughly $260,000, and then they write that 10.5 check real fast. So it doesn't even come close to covering the expense. We just put it in a little savings account. We have some, again, I mentioned Black Rock, we have Lofts Bay, Rockford Bay intersection, we've been working on that. Well, my predecessor started on that, and I've been in the chair 18 years. So we're finally building it this year, and we've had contributions, large contributions, even more than the in lieu of construction fee to go to that, and it's been helpful. But it's hard to keep up. I have people, we're talking about the people that are moving in here, and they expect a greater level of service from us. My common statement on the phone is that you can't have steak and prawns on a Happy Meal budget. So that's where we are. We have a Happy Meal budget.
I guess, I mean, do any of y'all have any other questions for us or the highway district directors, anything that came up? I mean, as we finish, to reiterate, we're meeting with them
Yeah,
the first
I was
week of
gonna ask you
June to work through some of these, to try to, figure out how to move forward with this, something the highway districts feel would be sufficient and something we feel sufficient, and then bring back to y'all sometime,
That
hopefully.
would be great. Yeah, if you guys get together and come up with a common approach that you all agree with, then we can pretty well.
What time is the June 6th meeting?
I think 7:30 or, I don't recall.
I think it is 7:30 a.m.
7:30 a.m. at the Lakes Highway District. Yeah, sure.
Sure.
You're not gonna be in office that day?
This is all over my head. I mean, it's just beyond me. So most of my questions are gonna be stupid, I think, but do you guys, the highway districts, do you accept a gravel road as a public highway road?
Currently, we won't accept just a gravel road for public maintenance. Is that, that answer your
I think that's what I'm
question?
saying. I mean, but you're not gonna maintain a road. When does it become a public highway district road? Maintained or otherwise?
When it's built to our standards, and then our board has to accept it for public maintenance.
And gravel's not up to your standards.
Correct.
So I'm a little confused about your concern for a road that's not yours.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
what
and I'm a little bit concerned about the need for the county to tell private property owners how to maintain their road. I like the idea of right-of-way. I mean, that's an easy one, right? It's important. The most important thing, as I gather, sitting here is the right-of-way. Is that what are the easements, which are the same thing, right?
Either one, it's not the same thing, but either one.
Yeah, for my mind, it's kind of the same. I mean, so you need to, what you want to be sure of is that there's space to do what you need to do sometime in the future when you need to do it. Is that right? And so I mean, I think if you're going to eat an elephant, you do it one bite at a time. And I like so the easement is the first thing. And I was about to ask the question why we can't separate the two, because there are two issues, and you already addressed that. There's new build and there's infill. So if the new build's the easy one, why not tackle the new build and then go back or continue to work on the infill? But that's a relative thing. You're right. No, I agree. But if the fire district standard is acceptable, then why are we not sticking with the fire district standard? I think the biggest, if I remember right, going back to the fire district, it's the point at which we get to 30 lots or something like that. And the guy at the end can't afford to improve the road because, or to punch it through to another access or egress. Is that right?
That's part of it, yeah. That's one of the issues. So secondary access.
If I can, the biggest issue is that the International Fire Code addresses width, but not structure.
Yeah.
So you take, and I was a volunteer fireman for 17 years, you take that truck off the road in the spring of the year. Take that truck off the road in the spring of the year down at Worley, where we're actually part of the Palouse country. It's all rolling clay. My well, it was 25 foot of clay before we hit the first rock when we drilled it. And that truck is gonna sit there till August when the farmer feels like taking you out of it. So you gotta have a structure. So, and we always require geotextiles down as a grade separation, then the structure. And that's where we get into materials, and Eric and I will have that discussion later. But anyway, you need that structure, and they didn't have it. So like Worley Fire District, they've already accepted this as their standard, because they're certain that they want that structure, so.
No, that's the standard that you guys also, excuse me, that's the standard you guys also have in here for your amendment, isn't it, for the private roads? Yeah, see, so they've gotta, not only do you have the fire requirements to be able to get it in there and turn it around and all, but they've got the new amendment in here for private roads that includes the structure of the template, so that the thing doesn't sink into the axles when it drives off the road.
So again, the highway districts don't tell the fire districts what they need to do, but we showed them what we had designed that would hold up, because that's what we expect on our unopened rights of way, which are rights of way that we don't maintain, but somebody wants to put a driveway down to their parcel and we allow it. So that's why it's carefully worded, with the help of our attorney, privately maintained, public, well,
Gravel
yeah,
road.
gravelled roads, privately maintained gravelled roads, so so as long as it's privately maintained, it can be gravelled, but at the time that it becomes the public's, it has to be paved. So
So you're not coming up with a new standard of a gravel road in a subdivision, a big subdivision, and what you're saying is that if it's going to be a public road and it's a big subdivision, you're gonna meet your standards up here. But if it's a private road in a big subdivision, it can be gravel as long as it's got the structural integrity to support the use and all those kinds of things. Is that what you're saying?
it can be less.
I got one right here. So Michael Lenz, Director with the Post Falls Highway District. So just to clarify what this supplemental to our standards, what the intent of it was, is we've got a lot of old viewers report roads that folks are using, which is public right of way, but we do not maintain those. So they come to us and say, you know, because typically right now what they can do is they can grade that road, apply dust abatement in the summer, plow it in the winter. Can we improve this road? And the answer was, you can bring it to highway district standards, which was obviously too expensive. So we tried to figure out a solution for how they could improve those privately maintained roads on public right of way that would be acceptable to the highway district. And the intent of this design was that it would create the foundation to be a future public road, you know, down the road. And so I just want to clarify that that was the meaning behind this, not saying this could be a new standard for a private subdivision, you know, that's in the county's hands, so.
It does kind of morph because the county's subdivision ordinance just says has to meet highway district standards.
Yeah, see.
So it does morph.
Does this help us with that part of the code that says we can also approve a variance that you agree to?
I would think so.
Yeah, I would think so.
Is that, we get those situations where there's a little stretch of road that really shouldn't have to meet highway district standards because there's nothing on either side for miles.
Right, well.
But we need to do something, and
The reason I mentioned the bicycle path earlier, it's just to give a vision, no matter what's in there, eventually, if the highway district's gonna take it over, it has to meet our standards. So take, a subdivision that's been in there 20 years already. They have the gate on there, they wanna take a torch and cut the hinges and let us in, right? they want us to maintain. Before we do that, we go in and we inspect the road. And if there's deficiencies in that road, those deficiencies have to be made up before we'll take it over. Because there's a lot of people been paying taxes for a long time waiting for the potholes to get fixed in front of their house.
Right.
And we're not gonna throw it onto ground that we never owned before.
Right.
So like the unopened rights of way, here a few years ago, we included an old right of way that was privately maintained, included that into our system because of the number of homes at the other end. That didn't have to come up to pavement, and that all depends on the highway district, and that could be a variance by the board too. Well, we included the end of that because there was very few homes, but enough that they couldn't keep it in shape, and the board took it over. So we improved that old right-of-way up to what we consider our gravelled road. It wouldn't be a standard, it would just be, what did you call it? Legacy road, one that we've been, a wagon trail that's just improved through the years, So, that's, there's a lot, there's leeway there. There's every subdivision, there's gonna be negotiations. And there is leeway there. In my eye, and again, I can't speak for the other highway districts, but in my eye, if they build a gravelled road, they have the right of way, they put a gate on it, I'm not worried about it until they wanna blow the hinges off that gate. Then it better be built to and including asphalt before we take it over.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
Well, we made headway, I think. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to the June 6th meeting. And
then we'll come back here at some point.
Yes, and I'll get with the chair and we'll restructure another follow-up meeting when it makes sense to do so. Meanwhile, you can use me as a pivot point if you'd like for any sort of information you want to get across to fire districts or the engineers and vice versa. Happy to be the liaison, if you will. So thank you all and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Just don't forget, we have a workshop on the 13th of June, 1:30.
Madam Chair, I won't be here
Okay.
for that. Mr. Callahan has graciously agreed to Zoom record it so I can review it later.
Okay,
Right.
great.
You won't miss anything. What was the one on the 13th about again?
That's with SCJ Alliance and DEQ.
That follow-up to the comp plan
Comp
update.
plan.
Well, they were gonna talk to the health district.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yes, sir.
And Madam Chair, I've got a question or two. What about county commissioners' public hearings? What's the schedule for those? I mean, there's gonna be a public, we had a scheduled meeting a week or two ago that I missed, but it turned out we didn't have anyway.
Right.
The
On
impact fees.
On impact fees. Is there any movement on it? Is the county commissioners?
Pat?
Chair, Commissioner Malloy, I can answer that. We've actually gone back to Tischler Weiss and to update and revise as necessary the impact fee studies, and particularly the part about the jail impact fee, to try to smooth over that issue with the cities. And so we have to wait until that's done before we can schedule anything, and then it would go to the Impact Fee Advisory Committee, then to the Planning Commission, then to the board.
So it's backburnered.
So we're probably looking at fall at this point.
How about
And
the,
then,
how about the
and then-
10-acre thing on this reservation?
That's the next one I want to ask
Yeah,
about,
I-
yeah.
That's on the 13th
But-
at 10 a.m., actually for public hearing.
Oh, okay.
Continued public.
Well, that's right, it's continued, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's
With the
right,
county commissioners?
yes.
yes.
That's the 10-acre minimum change to the rural zoning in the
In the
tribes.
tribal area,
Within the, yeah, with
right,
That's June 13th.
yes.
And did the subsequent mailing go out for all those?
Yes, and we got, I sent out to 68 people, 20 responded, the other 40 didn't.
Okay.
At least
Or
it's 20.
twice.
You were, yeah.
So it had some useful benefit.
But that's on a different issue though.
Well, I kind of combined the two.
No, I know you did, and that's good, thank you. Oh, and then, forgive me for not paying attention, but whatever happened on the family exemption for division of?
That's still in delibs. That comes up,
27th of June,
I think
something
so,
like that.
yeah, June 27th.
yeah,
Public hearing on the 27th?
Yeah, continued, yeah.
continued public hearing.
Deliberations, isn't that how they?
It's a continued public hearing.
They actually can, but they could do
They
deliberations.
could deliberate, but not necessarily.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Not from my end.
Then we are adjourned at
All right,
3:15.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you.